Fancy a people carrier? Well, you won't when you drive this one. The only serene thing about the pudding-shaped Nissan Serena is that it'll make you want to have a long lie down. A social services minibus with electric windows, it's noisy, thirsty, and about as seductive as a skip. Even Nissan dealers hate the diesel, and the petrol version is a real sluggard too. The Serena is the least regarded and fastest depreciating people carrier because it's simply as desirable as an old shoe.
Jeremy Clarkson also said that this was the worst car ever made. So when a mate of mine who's a scrap metal dealer had one of these go into the crusher, I rescued it.
Well, it's certainly noisy, particularly on country roads, so the radio's a bit of a joke. It was 20 years old when I got it, and it had been treated badly. For instance, to check the oil you have to lift the seat, and that's a bit of a job. So the previous owner didn't bother. The oil ran out, and he damaged the motor. But even with a half-crippled motor, it kept going. I became very fond of it. The seats were ruined, but I didn't need them. I was fitting it out as a camper. After the last long trip up to Canberra, the poor motor was really struggling. But I was lucky to find a company that brought motors from Japan. They'd had a Serena motor on the shelf for a long time, and they were so glad to move it, they gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. Unfortunately, because this is mid-engine, all my work had to come out so that the mechanic could fit the new motor. Actually, I didn't mind, because I'd thought of a lot of things I could do better. Anyway, I'll show you what I've done.
I found a roll of foam and foil insulation at a local junk store for a couple of dollars, so I put this down first on the floor. One of the problems I had in the past was cold coming up from the floor. This was particularly bad when I was in Canberra, especially at night. The local reject shop had some interlocking play mats on special, so I added them next. And finally, I put down 2 layers of carpet. It felt warmer already. Because the motor's back inside the cab, there's a lot of space under the bonnet that's mostly taken up by the spare wheel. By moving this up to the roof rack, I had room for the 2 spare batteries that had previously been inside. Funnily enough, although as Quentin said these are fairly heavy on fuel, the mileage figures were no worse with all the stuff on the roof. After I'd fitted the batteries, I realised I still had space on each side, and by moving them to one side, I had room for a plastic tub to hold my jumper leads and charger and compressor. I wanted to use as much recycled material as possible, and luckily around here that's not hard to find. A local factory gets a lot of imported material on pallets, and these can't be reused. They heap them outside, and locals are free to take them. The wood's strong, but it's light, and it was ideal for framing. Another source was the local timber store. They cut sheets of ply to size for people, and they often have a heap of cheap offcuts, which are suitable for my needs. Australia has some fantastic places to see, but it's also the world's driest continent, and water may not be available in some areas. I have a 75-litre water tank that was pulled from an old caravan. In the old build I had it under the bed, but I wanted to use that space, so I moved it to the back between the wheel wells. It was just too long, so I had to raise it and fitted a couple of drawers underneath. The first time I took the van on a rough road was a disaster. The pump separated from the tank and 75 litres of water poured into the back of the van. To gain access, this centre console has to be taken right out. Underneath it you'll find there's a big clip. Then the seat has to be leaned forwards. There are two clips under here. Which have to be opened. And then the whole seat hinges backwards. Getting to the motor on the driver's side was very difficult in the previous build, as the bed came almost up to the seat. The new bed solves this problem by being made in 4 parts. Every second slat is separate and can be slid out to double the width of the bed. Also the front is hinged, so it can be moved away from the seat when access to the motor is needed. The bed's higher than I would like due to the raising of the water tank, but I found 2 drawers from a broken unit and fitted them under the bed. I found an old entertainment unit on the side of the road with a free sign on it. I cut the back to fit over the wheel arch and I fitted it opposite the bed. It gives me more storage space. On top of it, I have an old Bluetooth amp and speakers that I had lying around. This allows me to play music from my phone, and I can also plug in my laptop. Above this is a shelf where I keep things that need to be easily accessible. Hidden behind the seat, there's a small chemical toilet. I've never needed to use it, but it's there in case the time comes when I do. Other features include a 12-volt fridge I bought at a garage sale for $5. Below that's a collection of battery chargers for all my tools and torches, etc. Looking inside, there's another fridge warmer which I use to heat food on the road, and an esky I use as a larder for things that don't need refrigeration. Around the back there's a small oven and a sink. There's a small clip-on table I use for food preparation, which folds away for travelling. Below that, where the broken bumper has been removed, I've replaced it with a tube which holds various bits and pieces, and also acts as a base when I'm carrying my bicycle. Looking at the front, there's a bull bar and 2 spotlights. The Serena headlights are excellent, but these spots are pointing off to the sides of the roads. This is kangaroo country, and at night they're a danger I want to see. Up on the roof, the big box holds shade cloth annexes for the side and rear, plus fold-up chairs, an axe, a spade, a straw broom, power leads, a hiking tent, and goodness knows what else. On the other side, behind the spare wheel, is a box containing folding solar panels. And finally, a couple of old crates, which I use as a ladder to reach the big box, or as seats with a blow-up cushion, or as a small table. They fit nicely inside when I'm travelling, and they can even be used to carry things. So, with everything ready to go, it's time to try her out. Winter is fighting its last battles. You may have heard the rain on the roof during some of the voiceovers, but spring's breaking through all over. And there's one place I want to go that'll test the car, plus fulfill another function. I love to photograph the spring flowers, and there's one that arrives at the end of winter that I've yet to get. The green hood orchid. There's a spot in the wombat forest that blazes in colour once spring gets going. Not much will be flowering today, but this is when the green hoods are to be found. By the time the main spring flowers are out, they'll have faded and gone. I have my daughter with me today, as she seems to take better photos than I do, so any still shots you see are hers. This part of the forest is private land, but we've met the owner, and she's one of the few who can see the value of not trying to change it into some sort of garden. The golden wattle's in flower everywhere at the moment, and you can see why Australia's green and gold national colours are taken from this plant. Bees love it, but the honey produced is rather inferior to later honey when they get their nectar from the eucalypts. During the gold rush here in the 1850s and 60s, miners cleared every stick of bush and dug holes everywhere to get at the gold. After all these years, the scars can still be seen. Australian wildflowers are mostly small, so you have to be careful where you tread. One of the first flowers in spring is the early Nancy, which is the rather ugly scientific name of Wormbia. It's a pretty little flower. I like it very much. These flowers with the sticky leaves are Drosera, one of the sundews. They survive on poor soils by catching insects to supplement their diet. Fortunately for us, they're really small. Wow, I didn't expect to see one of these little pink fingers this early. These are more like people expect an orchid to look like. The poor little thing must have set its alarm early, and now it's got nobody to share its pollen with. The Hardenbergia, or Happy Wanderer, is a creeper that is just getting started. In a few weeks it'll be everywhere, climbing all over the bush. We finally found what we were looking for when I almost stepped on it. These little orchids are green and they're easily lost in the surrounding leaves. To make the day even better, there were two different species living side by side. The greenhood orchids are among the first of the dozens of wildflower species found here, and I will definitely return later in the spring. Anyway, to finish up, I'll show you the photos my daughter took on the day. They're a bit embarrassing really, because I've got a really good camera and she took her photos with her phone.